An important principle in recovery from infidelity or addiction is a principle that is not really popular with the unfaithful spouse. And quite honestly, with some of the betrayed spouses, it's not something that they always rally around universally. And it's the principle that basically goes like this: you cannot heal from what you are unwilling to talk about. And it's the simple truth that if you can't talk about the infidelity, if you can't talk about the betrayal, if the betrayed can't talk about their emotions or what they're feeling or their pain or their hurt or their trauma, I promise you there will not be any healing. Now, I already know, to any unfaithful spouse that has heard that, there is this immediate inclination to think that that means that I mean you should buckle up and be willing to talk about this for the rest of your life, the rest of your marriage, every night, every week, every day, every hour. You should be able to talk about, terrible details, incredible amounts of shame and humiliation and pain, and that's exactly not what I am saying, and I'm going to give you some boundaries in just a few minutes. But I want to stay on the point that I just need to tell you, and this is going to ruffle some of your feathers, and some of you it's going to comfort you immensely, but you can't heal from what you're unwilling to talk about. You can't heal from what you're unwilling to confront. And these boundaries will help you have some controlled conversation. It'll help you put some parameters around how you talk about probably the most humiliating, the most gut-wrenching choice that you as an unfaithful have ever made, and what you as a betrayed has ever had to suffer through. The pain is immense. The agony is off the chart. The embarrassment, the shame, the humiliation is more than you may have ever felt in your entire life. Having said that, and while as a survivor of my own infidelity, I can attest to how humiliating it is as an unfaithful spouse, and I can, with great humility and empathy, give credence to the enormous amount of pain and hurt and trauma that the betrayed feels. You're going to have to be able to talk about it. But I hope in your talking about it, you do not do some of these things. Just the other day, somebody said on one of my video blogs, Samuel, well, you make mention of talking about it in a redemptive way. So what does a redemptive way look like? So here's a few things to stay away from if you want to talk about infidelity and talk about your healing in a redemptive way. Number one, talking about infidelity in a redemptive way means you are not marathoning. And this is a term that we use throughout all of our curriculum, especially at the EMS weekend. I don't know if you've ever had a conversation that started out and you immediately thought, well, this is going to be a tough one, and you had no intention of talking about it for 3 or 4 hours, but nonetheless, this little discussion blew up, and what you thought was going to be a 30-minute conversation is now 3 or 4 hours. You're into the middle of the night, hammering out the exact same details, talking about the same questions over and over again. I would tell you that you should be able to answer a question and talk about it for somewhere between 30 minutes, maybe 40 if it's a very significant issue, but most of the issues that you can talk about, the delivering of information, the answering of questions, could be done in a roughly 20-minute or so window. If you choose to marathon and go for hours on end, I promise you nobody wins. The temptation in the mind of the betrayed is to think that you win because now you're, if I'm being honest, maybe making them suffer, or maybe trying to make them get it, or maybe giving them back their answers to try and make them suffer or make you feel how you feel because their answers were complete crap or very hurtful. But it doesn't work that way. When you marathon, all you're doing is unfortunately causing more damage, creating more collateral damage, and driving both of you further and further apart. You're also not being redemptive when you shame or attack either the betrayed spouse or the unfaithful spouse. You might think, how can you shame the betrayed? Well, it's very easy because it's quite common that if an unfaithful spouse is triggered or flooding or dealing with an intense amount of anger, they're going to rattle off things like, well, if you'd have done this, I'd have never cheated. You wonder why I cheated because you continually do this. Is it any shock that I cheated? Look at the way you treat me. It's statements like that that are shaming the betrayed. And it's very easy to shame the unfaithful. Well, you're always going to be a cheater. Well, you know what? I knew I shouldn't have married you. And why would I want to forgive you? And you're just going to do this again. And why don't you go be with her or go be with him? And, the phrases are endless. That's shaming. That's demeaning. That's throwing the details in their face. Now, before you think that what I'm saying is your communication needs to be perfect and that you, as a betrayed, need to control your emotions and put them in a little box and handle yourself so perfectly and so calmly, and that I have these unrealistic expectations of you. Absolutely not. This is just one video blog. If you go through the hundreds of video blogs, you'll see that that's not my expectation or anybody who's ever been through infidelity's expectation. I'm just giving you boundaries to utilize in the best way possible to keep your conversation redemptive, because remember, you can't heal from what you're unwilling to talk about, but you have to have boundaries around that communication or the whole process breaks down. Another boundary to keep it redemptive is, we say this at the EMS weekend, when you're asking your spouse for details or information, you can't utilize a dysfunctional approach, which is to blow their head off. And what that means is, when you say to your spouse, tell me what you did. Tell me what you did with them. Where was it? What did you do? I know you're lying. Give me the information. Give me the information. I just need to know these details. But then they, the unfaithful, give you the details, and then you blow their head off, meaning you go, see, I knew it. I knew that you did this. I knew that you were going to do it. I can't ever trust you again. I'm never going to trust you. We're never doing this again. And it's just all these statements blowing their head off. They're not ever going to probably be honest with you again, because they have learned that when they give you the information that you want, you use it against them, bash them over the head with it, and blow their head off. And so what happens is, you're creating the expectation that anytime they give you information, this is how it's going to go. So they immediately hunker down and say, well, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to give them more information again, because that's what's going to happen whenever I give them even the slightest bit of information. But Samuel, that's ridiculous. You're expecting me, the betrayed, to handle myself perfectly whenever I find out new information. No, I'm not. I'm asking you to utilize maybe a 24 to 48 hour rule, which means when you have these conversations and you're asking for new information, that you say, look, you tell me the answer to these questions, I've got to know them, but I will make a commitment that there are no deal breakers. When you give me the information, I will think about it, pray about it, meditate about it, talk to other people that I can trust who are safe, or my therapist about it, and I will think about it for 24 to 48 hours. I won't make any decisions without absorbing the information, without processing the information with expert people, not going and just talking to other friends who are going to side with you and tell you what a worthless, SOB that unfaithful spouse is, but a safe, objective place where you can process the information and start to make decisions on whether or not you can overcome it and forgive it. And that's a process in and of itself. But if you blow their head off, I promise you, they're not going to want to give you more information. And so what's going to happen is, they will try and not give you more information, and then more information comes out, and then they're going to use it against you and say, well, every time I gave you new information, all you did was scream and yell my face off and use it against me and blow my head off, so why would I want to give you more information? What they're saying may have some truth in it, but they're defending themselves for why they were deceptive and didn't give you the information. And here we go. We are on the crazy cycle again. This trauma, this hurt is not going away. People always ask me, if we come to the EMS weekend, are we just going to continue to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it? You're going to talk about recovery. You're going to talk about what's happened. You're going to talk about how to move forward. Can you move forward? Why do you want to move forward? What's the best way to move forward? How do you forgive? How do you deal with triggers and reminders and intrusive thoughts and all the necessary things that go into recovery? You're not just going to sit and dig up the things that you've talked about. You're not going to just lose all your progress and all your momentum by talking about it. But if you can't talk about it, you're not healed. You're using avoidance. Avoidance isn't healing. Avoidance is we just won't talk about that. And then what happens is it comes back to bite you months or years down the road. And I just want to tell you, I promise you, from experience in dealing with hundreds, even thousands of people who utilized this approach, if you don't talk about it, and especially if you are a betrayed spouse, if you can't talk about it, it's going to do more damage. It's going to hurt you more. It's going to cause health issues. It's going to really create more trauma for you mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. And for roughly 30% or so of betrayed spouses, they end up having their own affair. I plead with you. Find a safe place to talk about it. Find safe people to talk about it, and healing will come.